It's been a while, and I know it's been a while since I sort of checked in with an occasional message for you all. Uh, I did one last week on Ash Wednesday, but that sort of seemed to be, rather than an occasional message, it felt more like uh, a planned sort of message about a specific Christian date. Having said that, we have now entered in and are in the seventh day of a season in the Christian year called Lent, which is originally from a Middle English word that means lengthen, because the days are getting longer and the sun is shining more and more, as I hope you're experiencing wherever you are. During this season of 40 days, we will and it's actually the sixth day of Lent, not the seventh, because Sundays don't count. How about that? Um, During this season, I will come to you at least weekly uh, for these kinds of message opportunities. I want to begin by reminding you you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved. That just for who you are, as the person you were made to be, at the core of who you are, God already loves you. That you have a unique part to play in the great unfolding of God's love in this universe, and the infinite preciousness that you bear, and unconditional love is not revocable. God just gives it to you. Because of apparently who God is. One of the things I suggested as a part of Lent is either taking up a practice, or many people, an older way of being a part of Lenten practice is to sacrifice something, to give something up. In either case, whichever one works for you, or if you choose to do both, I wish you all the best in that practice. I wanted to say a little bit about what I have been intentionally doing this week as a practice. I've been watching and paying attention to the daffodils in my backyard. What does that have to do with Lent, James? Well, I'm going to tell you. At least I'm going to try. Uh, about a year and a half ago, we put in a shed in the backyard. And long before we moved in this house 30 years ago, there were daffodils planted in our backyard in a couple of locations. Well, one of the sets of daffodils is now much more shaded. And so while all of our neighbors' daffodils that I have seen are in full bloom, ours are taking just a little bit longer this year. They are adapting to a changing reality by taking it a little slower, using what they have, what they're getting, which is perhaps a little bit less sunlight time and a little bit more shade time. They're adapting to that and rolling with that. Now, when I see that, I think of God, and I also think of me. And I think about how God is constantly adapting. God's always there as love, but is constantly adapting to the changing conditions of the universe and of our lives together by being present to us in love, no matter what comes our way. No matter what happens, God adapts to be present with us in all the moments of our lives. But one of the things that I find is one of my challenges, maybe this is no big deal for you, but adapting for me is not always so simple. I don't adapt to change so well. James Donnelly, our worship leader at St. James, had a good sermon this past Sunday about change and about how lots of effects. And rather than recap that changing sermon, you can always have access to it and go to it if you wish on our website, sjumc.net. But I thought about how the daffodils take what comes and do the best they can with what they have. Some of you may be saying to yourself, James, why didn't you just move the daffodils, dig up the bulbs and move them somewhere else? Um, well, that would probably assure their death because I'm not good with flowers. But nature seems to be taking care of these daffodils, and they're growing while slower. I can see the buds beginning to come. The promise of God is to be always with us, no matter what. And sometimes we adapt slowly, and sometimes we adapt quickly, and sometimes we don't adapt at all. But at no point along the way does God abandon us in that process. And so I want to remind you, as I have taken up this practice of watching the daffodils, I go out in the backyard when I'm putting vegetable waste in our compost pile, and I look at those, the stalks that are coming up and have come up, and the beginnings of the bud, and I think to myself how ongoing and faithful God's love is for me. And I know that God's invitation for me is that because God will always be there, I will always be with you, is God's promise to us. That even when the world is constantly changing around us, and it feels different in lots of different ways. As the world is changing around us, God's constant sustenance, sustaining us in all things, is there for us. I hope you're feeling that sustenance in this world that we're living in now that's changing. But if it's causing, as it is for so many people, so much greater anxiety, so much greater a sense of depression and feeling of isolation, if it's causing those things for you, I want to invite you today to remember this. You are infinitely precious. You are unconditionally loved. You are just who you are because that's who God wants you to be. God made you to be a person. And to God, that makes you of infinite worth. You are loved. You are precious. And no one can take that away from you. In the midst of your isolation, depression, reach out to someone. If it has to be a mental health professional or someone else, or whoever you need, let it be that. Let it be that. There is no weakness in reaching out. It's an admission of the importance of our connectedness, one to another and to God. So I encourage you, reach out and ask for help in the midst of this, never forgetting you're loved and precious. I look forward to seeing you the next time I come for a message, and I hope you're finding a practice in this season, perhaps, whatever it is, to ground you and remind you how much you're loved, and how precious you are. Never forget that, and I'll see you the next time.